Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And I'll tell you this, man, it really feels like we have reached the final moments before the big game on Saturday. I felt like I really turned a corner on this yesterday, where I just got so excited about what's about to go down on Saturday and obviously tonight, leading into that with our DawgNation on Tap event, which you're all still invited to attend. I'll tell you more about it here coming up in a moment. You can just really feel, and I've heard from people in Athens who've been saying this. Obviously, I'm around Athens here in the Atlanta area today to do the show, or right in the smack heart of Atlanta doing the show. But wherever Georgia fans are, you can just feel the intensity starting to pick up here. So we're really, really excited about it, and obviously going to try to lead into it in a great way today. That means Terrence Edwards, as always, on a Thursday, and how about a special guest joining us today, too, in celebration of his appearance tonight with DawgNation on Tap. We're happy to have Rodrigo Blankenship live on the show with us here today. The national media talk is picking up for Georgia and Texas right on schedule, and we're not surprised by that. It feeds into exactly what Georgia want, I think, the mood to be for this game. So we'll talk about that and more. And by the way, also what happens if the wrong series of events takes place this weekend, the chaos that could be resulted in the SEC. We'll give you all of that here coming up over the course of the next couple of minutes together. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Tonight is the night. The build-up for this has been so much fun. I have loved the excitement that's been in the air for this. But tonight, we do DawgNation on Tap from Terrapin Brewery. It's going to be an incredible experience. The entire DawgNation team is going to be there. It's going to be a multimedia experience. We've got special guests on hand, too. John Stinchcomb, Davin Bellamy, Rodrigo Blankenship. And oh, yeah, by the way, Rodrigo will actually join us later on the show. Y'all have loved Rodrigo this year, and I have loved the way in which he's been received by our audience. So we'll talk to Rodrigo about Georgia, Texas before the show is done today, but we'll also have Rodrigo Blankenship tonight at the Terrapin Brewery and Tap Room in Athens. So before we dive into the show today, let me give you a reminder about how it's all going to go down tonight. So we'll have a live Q&A. We'll talk some Georgia football. We'll have some special guests. We'll hear from them. Food courtesy of Surcheros, and that's free, by the way. It's amazing. I can't believe we're able to do this, but we are. Your first beer tonight, courtesy of Terrapin, will be complimentary as well. That is an awesome thing, too. And oh, yeah, tonight, somebody in the building at the Terrapin Brewery and Tap Room in Athens is going to win a pair of tickets to the big game in Athens on Saturday. So if you're hoping to be in the building on Saturday, the place to be tonight is the Terrapin Beer Company, because there you have your chance to win a pair of tickets to the big one coming up on Saturday. Now, here's what we've been asking you to do. We've been asking you to RSVP, DawgNation.com/on-tap. Just let us know you're going to be there. That way we make some space for you to sit, some food from Surcheros, plenty of beer, of course, courtesy of Terrapin. We want to make sure we have all of that. But here's the truth. As we get to this last minute hour, I know you've got friends. Maybe they're not quite as responsible as you are. You've already RSVP'd. In fact, we've got hundreds, and I mean hundreds of RSVPs. So from that standpoint, you've already made your plans to be there, but you've got friends that didn't RSVP. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to go ahead and say, if your friends, or maybe it's you yourself, if you haven't RSVP'd, if you want to come, still please come. Just come. RSVP if you can, because that helps out all our people who are making this an awesome event, and we want to show them great respect because they've been working really hard at this. But we also know that, listen, you're like me, you're busy, you're running around doing 1,000 things. You hear about this, and you say, oh, I want to come, but I didn't RSVP. You can just come. So tonight, Terrapin Beer Company, we're going to be there in Athens from 6 to 9 p.m. DawgNation folks live Q&A, enjoying some free food courtesy of Surcheros. First beer tonight, courtesy of Terrapin, will be complimentary. And tonight, someone will win a pair of tickets to the big game on Saturday, too. That plus Davin Bellamy, John Stinchcomb, Rodrigo Blankenship. What a night. It's a huge, huge gathering of UGA fans. We'll see tonight, 6 to 9 p.m. for an outstanding event content we're calling Dog Nation on Tap. And if you can, just let us know you're coming. You still have your chance to do that. DawgNation.com/on tap for more on that. We all good? Any questions? Hopefully not. All right, let's move on to this, and I'll see you tonight, Terrapin Beer Company, for that. And, of course, Rodrigo Blankenship later on in the show, in addition to Terrence Edwards, who'll join us here in a moment, too. It sort of feels like that there has been, at least seemingly, a reckoning amongst many in the national media because of what was one of the most ridiculous offseason narratives we've ever seen. And I will tell you this. Obviously, Texas is the opponent on Saturday. I don't like Texas, but I don't have any particular hatred for Arch Manning. Seems like a pretty good dude. Certainly whatever hype existed around him before the season began was not really Arch's doing. In fact, I was at SEC Media Days when Arch made what was, in many ways, his first public appearance on a national stage. And there that day, he tried to, I think, do everything he could to ramp down the hype that existed around him. He certainly didn't cultivate it, certainly didn't fan the flames of it, but nonetheless, he was the recipient of a ludicrous degree of off-season hype. We said this in the early stage of the season when he flopped against Ohio State, when he really played poorly in other games after that, trying to use the Sam Houston game as, boy, this is what Arch Manning's all about. All of that was really embarrassing, but as I said on social media at the time, not embarrassing for Arch in particular, but it ought to be a reckoning for the national media. That, to me, the way in which the media had talked about Arch Manning was perhaps evidence that the national media, as we think of it, is just essentially broken, that it is so disconnected from the regular conversation happening among fans that is maybe more based in reality or understanding of what the landscape of college football is in this new environment where everybody's trying to get attention, everybody's trying to cultivate clicks, and frankly, we're no different. In this new environment, the degree to which Arch Manning was hyped was just an example of the media has broken itself trying to keep itself relevant or whatever else you want to say. I do think there's a reckoning on that needed to come. And maybe we have some reason to believe that reckoning did come because probably the worst offender on any of this may have been Paul Feinbaum during the offseason, not just hyping up Arch Manning, and you know he did that, but also using every radio interview he ever did as an opportunity to take what was some dissatisfaction on the part of Georgia fans, repackage it as his own idea, and then sell it back to those angry Georgia fans. We saw a lot of that from Paul Feinbaum. We called that out as ridiculous at the time. I think it was fairly easy to see that. But Feinbaum still did it, still hyped up the Arch Manning stuff. And this week, Paul actually happened to be on the beat Monday nights. You see that on the Dog Nation video channels with our Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith too. Paul on there with Mike kind of tried to own up to it all. Yeah, you know what? Said too much about Arch Manning, and yeah, you know what? Shouldn't have said those things about Gunnar Stockton and Mike Bobo, the degree to which I did. Paul kind of owned his role in all of this on the Dog Nation video channels on Monday. Just for fun, let me let you hear that. This is from On the Beat.
And as far as Arch Manning, I had him winning the Heisman, and I had Gunnar Stockton selling insurance somewhere in Conyers, Georgia, with Mike Bobo. So I think I've got a lot to answer for. But that's part of what we do. We throw out opinions, and we don't just do it to be malicious. We put them out there based on what we think is our gut instincts, or sometimes more than that. But Gunnar Stockton has been an absolute star. We saw that going back to Knoxville in the Tennessee game where I felt like he came of age, and he's done it so many times. And Mike Bobo, for all the criticism on the Feinbaum show, has dialed up some really unique and creative plays this year. So here we are. Texas is the one limping. They're not so much limping, but they're in such a desperate situation where Georgia has a little bit of air and room to breathe. And I think as we walked out of that game 6-7 weeks ago against Alabama, you had to wonder, would Georgia be able to survive? And they have.
My kids would like to point out that Paul Feinbaum just said 6-7 weeks ago. If your kids are listening, I'm sure they're happy about that too. But nonetheless, Feinbaum says, all right, I hyped up Arch Manning. I got those clicks then. I got that attention then. And I dragged Mike Bobo's name through the mud and Gunnar Stockton's name through the mud because that's what I saw some Georgia fans doing online, and I took that anger and repackaged it and sold it back to them. All right, you got me. I did it. Maybe I shouldn't have done it, but I'm going to own up to it now. Simple as, Is it that easy to do it, apologize for it, and now we're moving on? I don't know that it should be quite so easy. I don't know that it's quite as clean and easy as that to say, okay, you got me. I peddled some bad offseason narratives, but I'm owning up to it now. Because if anything, all of this the entire time, especially as it relates to Arch Manning, all of it's been overblown. Because when the Manning hype took place, we said this is ridiculous. But we also said it was ridiculous during the season when the same media people went 180 degrees the other direction, and now Arch Manning's the worst quarterback of all time. We said that was ridiculous too. And frankly, it's the same motivation, a couple of weeks ago as it was several months ago of we're going to hype up Arch Manning because there are clicks to be gotten from that, and now we're going to trash Arch Manning because there are clicks to be had from that. All of that's just ridiculous, and all of that, I think, is fairly transparent, and I don't know that one apology one time necessarily makes it all better, just to be frank. But the point is, no matter what's been said about Arch or what's been said about Gunner or all of these guys leading into all of this, it is amazing, and by amazing, I mean predictable. It is amazing how right on schedule the Arch Manning roller coaster is rolling in here after the hype of the offseason turned into the trashing Arch of September, and now right on time, just ahead of the big game on Saturday in Athens between Georgia and Texas, the Arch Manning hype is returned. I saw, for instance, Booger McFarland on SportsCenter. He's like, it's time for the real Arch Manning to stand up, as if what's going to happen on Saturday in Athens is solely a referendum on Arch and no other player in the game really matters. I saw Stephen A. Smith on First Take, and this is always the number one example that something's gone mainstream. As low information as First Take is, and as poorly served as the audience of First Take is when it comes to any actual sports conversation, whoever they're talking about, you better believe that now represents the absolute lowest common denominator of the sports conversation. So if Manning's being talked about on First Take, that is a prime example that he's back mainstream again, and that they're feeding that to that audience again. And Stephen A's on there this week saying, Manning's such a big name that may be enough to get Texas in the playoff no matter what its record is. I don't necessarily disagree with that. There's a degree which that's probably true. The Texas will get an extra long look because of the fame of Manning and the notoriety of his last name, if nothing else. But it's another example of, well, if Stephen A. in First Take is back talking about Arch again, if SportsCenter guys are back doing this again, then Arch Manning is just back. The Manning hype is just back, right in time for this game against Georgia on Saturday. So much so that a guy that generally speaking we kind of like, although it depends on the moment based on some of the stuff he said this season, Greg McElroy on his podcast this week, it's called Always College Football, he's got Texas winning the game on Saturday, and he's got Arch Manning playing the role of hero. This is Greg McElroy from just a day or two ago picking Texas to win the game and citing Arch Manning as the reason why.
I'm taking Texas to win the game. I think Texas has a slightly higher ceiling on the offensive side than we've seen so far. We saw it in a gotta-have-it situation against Oklahoma. The offense played smart. They were able to establish the run. And Arch Manning, I think, will play the best game of his career on arguably the biggest stage of his career when he takes his team into a hostile setting and potentially hands the Georgia Bulldogs their second loss of the year.
Look, you can make whatever pick you want to make. We obviously make picks all the time. Some of ours are probably pretty ridiculous. I'm not here to say that just because McElroy picked against Manning, it's necessarily going to be wrong. But I do think there are two things that have got to be pointed out here just for a moment. Thing number one is this. McElroy talking almost solely about Arch Manning in that particular portion of his discussion about the game. Others in the national media right now who've turned this Georgia-Texas showdown into, well, is Arch Manning for real? And is Arch Manning going to lead Texas to the playoff, making this nothing more than just a platform for Manning's potential stardom or lack thereof? They're missing the point that you're aware of this, but so many national media types don't seem to know this. I believe that McElroy probably does. But nonetheless, Gunner Stockton's having the better year. Gunner Stockton is having a better year than Arch Manning has had. And by the way, even if Stockton doesn't outplay Manning on Saturday, that's probably still true for the totality of the season. But if you're looking for one quarterback to play better on Saturday, the safest bet would be a guy like Stockton because he's the guy that's been having the better overall year. In fact, one of the things we've had some fun with so far this season, I don't know why this matters to me, but it's just been interesting, is every week David Cobbs, the writer of CBS Sports, has been ranking their top quarterbacks, power ratings for all like 136 quarterbacks. This week, Arch Manning, still well behind Gunnar Stockton. Stockton's moved up to 13th after being 17th a week ago. They're citing the fact that, listen to this, these are a couple of interesting numbers, that Stockton's 157.12 passing efficiency is the best in the SEC. I have no idea how you tabulate passing efficiency, but the fact that it's the best in the SEC matters to me. Also says that his 69.5% completion percentage mark is also best in the SEC. So best passing efficiency, best completion percentage, and he also leads Georgia with 7 rushing touchdowns. That is what Gunnar Stockton's been able to do for Georgia. So the idea that Saturday is some sort of a referendum on what Arch Manning is, based on what evidence from this season, if anything, Gunnar Stockton is the better quarterback in the game. Doesn't guarantee that Georgia's going to win, but Stockton has been the better overall quarterback in the game. It'd be nice if some of the national conversation moving into Saturday reflected some of that, but we won't hold our breath. But the other part of this is when you look at how it's going to play out on Saturday, the truth is the average listener or viewer to our show knows that whether it's Arch getting the attention or Gunnar being overlooked or maybe Gunnar getting the credit he deserves, either way, as we've been saying all year long, that the 2025 season for Georgia is not, was not, will not be a referendum on Gunnar Stockton alone. That's the one thing we've been very consistent about, and that's proving to be true. And if that's been true all season long, it is also true on Saturday too, that it's 22 guys on the field, and all of them, the full depth of the roster, in other words, is going to be the thing that determines how this game is decided. And those very talented players, and Georgia's still got them, Texas has got plenty too, we have to be honest about saying, how comfortable they are playing in the kind of big game moment that Saturday is going to be provide. That's a lot more crucial than just what happens between Arch Manning and Gunnar Stockton, the old school Wild West duel between these two gunslinging quarterbacks. It's really a lot more about the other players in the field and their comfort in the big game that may determine the outcome of this. And yesterday, when Kirby Smart appeared on the SEC the SEC coaches teleconference, a phone call type deal, in doing so, Kirby Smart essentially said just that. This is what Kirby Smart said.
I think recruiting well is the first step. You got to have good football players, and players win games more times than coaches do. I think, your program, just like Sark's program there, you get accustomed to playing in big matchups, so you have a little less maybe anxiety. They have a better expectation of what it takes to win in those type games. And our kids have played in a lot of them, and so have theirs.
So that's actually a pretty interesting statement from Kirby Smart that seems sort of bland, but if you listen to it more closely, the key to winning big games is to have very talented players who are comfortable playing in big spots. It's simply said, but not necessarily. It's simply said, but not necessarily simply executed and cultivated within the program. But that's what Georgia is. It's a bunch of talented players who don't shrink from the moment. Even late in games when they become hard to win, Georgia doesn't shrink from the moment. That's actually a pretty good, interesting distillation of what Georgia is all about. And when it comes to Kirby Smart saying, it's always interesting how he takes the spotlight off himself or takes the spotlight off his counterpart, Steve Sarkisian, that this begins with recruiting. It's the kinds of players you bring into your program. Yes, they got to be big enough, and yes, they got to be fast enough, but they also have to be mentally tough enough to handle all of this. And in recent years, no doubt about it, we've seen Georgia and Texas become significant recruiting rivals. They once battled over Arch Manning, and Texas won that, to that program's credit. But that is far from the only player that Georgia and Texas have squared off against. And in some cases, Texas has come in here and gotten some of ours. In some cases, we've gone in there and gotten some of theirs. But it's a recruiting rivalry that's taken, I think, a pretty interesting shape here recently, and it does not appear to be going away anytime soon as well. And going back to Monday, Kirby Smart talked about that too.
They recruit nationally. I mean, a lot of coaches have gone to Texas and just recruited the state of Texas. I think Sark and his staff have reached out both West Coast to California, all the way down to Florida. They've gotten some guys, and they've gotten some guys from Georgia. We've gotten some guys from Texas that we think are good players. So it's all, in the eye of the beholder in terms of who you go after and who you win. Is certainly recruiting wins tie into the future of your program and the success of your program.
Once again, more interesting than it probably appears at face value. Texas has got a lot to sell. They're going to go after big national players. Georgia's got a lot to sell. They're going to go after big national players. And sometimes the guy you both fight over chooses you or chooses them. But Kirby Smart says also some of this is about which players do you choose to value the most, and which players do you choose to really zero in on as the kinds of guys that can improve your program, your locker room culture, your on-field performance, and everything else. And we would say, with that in mind, man, Georgia's still in pretty good shape. The Georgia roster, even though Texas got all the offseason attention, the Georgia roster is still in pretty good shape. Not so much so that it guarantees a win on Saturday, but as we addressed, I think it was Monday, a good enough roster in a good enough spot here in the month of November that a lot of Georgia fans suddenly find themselves, including myself, and I've admitted this, feeling a little more confident now than they have at various points during the season. So just for a second, let me close this conversation out by asking you a question. It's really more of a question I'm asking to myself, but I'll ask it to you. How confident is it okay to be in Georgia right now? Because at various times during the year, and I've told you this, not quite so sure this team had a national championship ceiling. Not quite so sure it was going to win the games it was playing from week to week. I've probably expressed more doubt week to week than in Georgia's season, certainly the last few years for sure, if not for the entire time that we've been doing this show. There have been some games in which, boy, I wasn't quite so sure what we were going to get from Georgia. But slowly and surely, Georgia's playing better. They've now covered the spread in 4 of their last 5 games, if you care about that. They are exceeding expectations now on a fairly regular basis. And they're playing an opponent that they handled pretty well a year ago, especially on defense, because this wasn't a great defense last year, but only 15 points allowed to Texas last October, only 19 points allowed in a game that went into overtime against Texas in December. This is a Georgia team that's seemingly playing better against an opponent that it's seemingly matched up pretty well with a year ago. Now, if you want to find some reason to doubt, you can say, well, game last October, you had very elite first-round picks like Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker playing as well as they ever played. Maybe Georgia doesn't have that many first-round picks on this team right now, and maybe that's a reason to be more doubting or more concerned about this game and this opponent this year than you would have been a year ago. And maybe that's true. If you're the kind of person that needs to find something to worry about, maybe that's something you can worry about. But I find myself wanting to, Georgia fans sometimes say it this way. Everybody has their own inner Larry Munson. And if you're old enough to remember when Munson was calling the Georgia games, Munson was always looking at whatever the darkest cloud was, whatever the biggest reason for concern was. He was always looking for it. And I would say in this season for Georgia, or in the lead up to the season, for some Georgia fans, that dark cloud, that reason for doubt, sometimes it was a little easy to find. You could point it out and say, this may be the thing that holds Georgia back. But given how Georgia's played as of late, those dark clouds and those reasons for doubt, they're not quite as easy to find anymore. That suddenly this is a Georgia team that's playing a little better. And Georgia fans, myself included, our confidence seems to be growing as all of this takes shape. Suddenly it's a big national showcase against Texas. National media is in love with Texas as they ever were. And yet I find myself feeling pretty confident about this game. Is it okay to feel that way? Was it better when I was channeling Larry Munson in previous weeks this season? Don't quite know. But I do think this team has played well enough. I'm talking about Georgia. I do think they've played well enough that a little confidence is warranted. And I go into Saturday with a very optimistic outlook about how this might turn out. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp. And we are glad that you are with us no matter how you get to us today. Video, live, 10 a.m., across all platforms, on demand after that, radio app and Sports Radio 960 app, podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Apple, Spotify, everything else. We are just very, very happy to have you with us. And as I told you off the very top of the program, we're looking forward to seeing you tonight. It has been a while here in Georgia. We've done DawgNation Invasions and things like that. Been a while in Georgia since we've done a live event, an opportunity to get together. But we're doing that for DawgNation on tap tonight, and we want you there. If you've RSVP'd, I'm glad you're coming. If you can still RSVP, go to DawgNation.com/on-tap to do so. But if you just don't have time to do that, or if you're just hearing this just before the event, we're Terrapin Beer Company tonight in Athens. If you just want to just come, you've got my permission. And if they ask you a question at the door, tell them that BA said we could just come. So just show up and be there. We'll make some room for you. And we're glad to have you there. DawgNation on tap tonight. Terrapin Beer Company. Great list of special guests. So much fun. Can't wait to see you there tonight. Terrapin Beer Company for that. Going to be a great time right there in Athens. By the way, big thanks to our friends at Meriwether and Tharp who make today's show possible. And as much fun as it is, talk about Georgia, Texas, and talk about DawgNation on tap, and talk about all that great stuff. Here's what we know. The divorce conversation is nowhere near as enjoyable. It's a scary thing. It's a sad thing. Divorce always makes me sad in every situation. And yet, even if that's the case, here's what I also know, because I've heard enough of your stories over the years, that even if you do everything you can to avoid divorce, and I think you probably should do that, even if you do everything you can to avoid divorce, there is in some situations a reality that sets in. This is an unavoidable next step for you. And if you find yourself facing that circumstance, well, first of all, I'm very sorry for you, and I genuinely want to pray for you over that. But in addition to that, I want to give you a small piece of advice, and I am quite confident in what I'm about to tell you, that our friends at Meriwether and Tharp can help you get through this challenging time, and they can set you up for a more enjoyable next season of your life in the process here. And they've heard stories like yours thousands of times before. And every situation is fact specific, of course, but in hearing stories as many as they have and helping as many people as they had now across the entire state, our friends at Meriwether and Tharp have learned to shape the way they serve you to meet the needs of people like you. And one of the ways in which they do that is through the cost certainty of this. Divorce, how much is it going to cost me? You know, Meriwether and Tharp is very clever in how they've created some pricing options for you, including what they call their model M&T level of service, which can either be a flat fee or an ongoing subscription, as a way of giving you just the cost certainty that you probably seek as you look to get through a situation that maybe you didn't ask for but has been thrust upon you. This is a way to do that. So our friends at Meriwether and Tharp are standing by to help you, and I do think you should reach out, have a conversation with them, and then just find out what they say and listen to them and allow that guidance to chart a course for you on your next step. So please check them out online. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That is GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, glad to have you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today. We got two great guests. It's Rodrigo Blankenship later on. It's Terrence Edwards in a moment. Prior to that, though, let us go around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And something very funny happened this week. You may be aware of this. The internet certainly talked about this plenty. There had been some reports that former Florida coach Billy Napier was seen at Georgia practice. And let me tell you, and if you got time, you're all busy, you got a lot going on, you ought to peruse social media on this. I'm not going to show you any of the stuff on the screen because we don't like to put small accounts, regular average Joes on screen, if they don't ask for it. But there are a lot of Florida fans, man. They are so mad about this. They cannot believe the act of betrayal in their eyes of Billy Napier, a coach that they chose to fire, now his own man, free to do whatever he wants. And his first act is in his post-employment stage is to go hang out at a Georgia practice. Florida fans are so mad about that. In fact, some of them even wondered if these online reports were even true. Is Billy Napier truly at a Georgia practice? What was he doing if he was at a Georgia practice? Well, this week, once again, going back to yesterday, SEC coaches teleconference, we did get confirmation from Kirby Smart that yes, Billy Napier was at Georgia's football practice. This is what Kirby Smart said about that.
No, Billy's a good friend of mine. We coached together for years. I've known him. I mean, people don't understand relationships and coaches. There's coaches have a brotherhood and a fraternity together. And his dad was good friends with my dad. His dad was really good friends with Coach Bobo, and we all grew up in the state of Georgia with our fathers coaching high school football. We're well respected people, and he's been a friend for a long time. So he dropped by, yeah, but that was really it.
So the narrative online is, okay, well, there was talk earlier this week that Arch Manning and Ty Simpson, the Alabama quarterback, are friends, and that Manning's going to talk to Ty Simpson. And in my mind, I'm like, hope he don't talk to him too much, because Ty Simpson seemed to have a lot figured out against Georgia earlier this year, so hopefully they don't talk too much. But Arch is going to talk to Ty, and Kirby's going to talk to Billy. The one claim to fame that Billy Napier has this year is Florida beat Texas. And so both sides are going to get some extra information about the other. I personally happen to think, we'll ask Terrence Edwards about this in a moment, but I personally happen to think that most of this is overblown, that there really probably aren't a lot of big secrets to be had. I really, even after I just said what I said, I really don't know what Ty Simpson, the friend of Arch Manning, could actually tell Arch Manning that maybe Manning couldn't discover for himself, or the Texas coaching staff, Steve Sarkisian included, don't already know. And I feel the same way about Billy Napier, who's a sharp football guy, and whether he's a successful coach or not, he clearly knows a lot about the game. He is, to use an overused phrase, he is obviously a ball knower. And he beat Texas earlier this year, but I don't know that means that he's got the secret formula for how you beat Texas. I think a lot of that's probably overstated. It's never a bad thing to have additional information from people who know football, but it's not a magic formula for Georgia's success. To say this a different way, I think that Napier's presence at the Georgia practice is Georgia, Kirby Smart in particular, helping Napier more so than it is Napier helping Georgia. Because if Kirby Smart really believed that Billy Napier knew a secret to help beat Texas, Kirby would want to keep that a secret. Georgia practices are closed down. If you didn't want Napier to be seen, you could have kept him in the football building. You could have kept him locked away. You could have had him in some dark corner somewhere providing all the information. But if you allow him to be viewed at practice and then escape onto the internet, that's pretty clearly an endorsement by Kirby Smart for Billy Napier. And Kirby's old boss, Nick Saban, used to do this all the time, helping guys rehabilitate their career, whether it be Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian or anybody else. Nick Saban did a lot of that. No surprise that Kirby Smart would also do that for one of his good friends too. So I would be in favor of Georgia using anything it could to help be ready for Texas, but I don't think that Napier is necessarily going to have the secret for how to win games like this. If he did, he'd probably still be employed by Florida. But I also don't have a problem with Kirby Smart helping Billy Napier move on to the next phase of his coaching life. I believe he probably wants one. Maybe this can go and do some small part towards helping him do that. Anybody here in the state of Georgia, the Napier family's got long ties to our state. They'll tell you that Billy's a great guy. Now that he doesn't work for Florida anymore, I no longer view him as an enemy. So I'm happy to have him at Georgia practice. Happy to see him move on to the next phase of his coaching career, and I don't mind that Kirby Smart is helping him out with that. So if you want the biggest takeaway for a Georgia fan from this story, if you got time, go check out the Florida fans. They are so mad. Oh my gosh, they're so bothered. And if you think that Georgia's done all the winning it can do in this rivalry with Florida, the fact that here we are several weeks after another beatdown of Florida, these Florida fans are still talking about Georgia. That's everything a Gator hater needs to feel pretty good here today. And we'll make that around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Now, while we don't like the lousy, stinking Gators that come from Florida, there are plenty of things about the state of Florida that we love. And for me, one of the things about Florida I love just about as much as anything else is Daytona Beach. Grew up going there, still enjoy being there. It is an awesome place to be, and it is a wonderful beach getaway for you to consider. I love winter beach travel. I do, because I hate the winter. In fact, last couple of days in Georgia, it's been miserably cold, and I just can't stand that. I want to get away from that. And honestly, if you want to get get to a great beach where you can avoid the winter and get some sunshine, get a tan, to me, there's no better sign that you're living well. If you get a tan in the winter, that's something I aspire to. Right now, I'm not achieving that, but I wish I was. Go to Daytona Beach. You can get one right now, and you can get better savings on a hotel and resort, and you may realize. DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. One more time, DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals. 23 miles of shoreline, international airport. You can fly right to it, especially from Atlanta. Great opportunity for a great beach getaway this winter. You deserve one. Do it and enjoy it, and you'll have a great time at Daytona Beach. We're happy to have him as a part of Around the Dawghouse. Okay, before we're done, it's Rodrigo Blankenship. Can't wait to welcome Hot Rod onto the show. Also, nightmare scenario for the SEC could happen, and it wouldn't be too convoluted for it to occur. We'll give you that coming up in a moment, too. But for now, on everything about a gigantic game on Saturday, let's talk to Terrence Edwards ahead of a big game for himself coming up on Friday night as his Mount Vernon team starts the state playoffs. All of that and more here right now on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
It is a very busy time for our guy Terrence Edwards right now. His team has state playoffs beginning tomorrow, so kind enough to share some of that time with us. We're happy to have Terrence on the program. Terrence, thanks for being here. Best of luck, of course, to Mount Vernon tomorrow night. And thanks for talking a little Georgia football with us here right now.
Oh, thanks. You know I'm always going to make time for DawgNation.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. So you're a coach. Let me ask you this. I don't know that Billy Napier being at Georgia practice, even if as a head coach he just beat Florida a couple of weeks ago, I don't know what kind of extra secrets he probably has. He knows a lot about football, and it's always good to have football knowledgeable guys hanging around the program. I don't dispute that. But I don't know that there's some sort of magic secret to beating Texas that Billy Napier would possess, even though he just beat Texas. How valuable do you think his knowledge would have been at a Georgia practice this week?
I don't think it would have anything to do with Texas. It has everything to do with Georgia. As a coach that he just had to prepare for, to scout for 2 weeks because they had a bye week as well, he could tell Kirby and company their tendencies, what he saw that exposed whatever tendencies that they did expose. He could give them those tips because I'm sure if he saw those, other schools are seeing those as well. So I think that's the biggest thing that he could bring to the table is just telling the offense and the defense probably their notes and share their notes about Georgia offense and defense that could help Georgia clean up some things offensively and defensively.
Honestly, I think that's such a good point. I hadn't really considered that. And we hear Kirby talk about this all the time, especially during off weeks, that, we're self-scouting. We're working on ourselves. And some of that are tendencies. And here's the thing, Terrence, is like you may know your strengths and weaknesses for your players, but in terms of whether it be play calling tendencies or things that you do habitually, sometimes it's hard to see that in your own self because you're so entrenched in it. But the team that you're playing, they probably do have some insight. I hadn't thought about this, that Napier may know more about Georgia and more helpful for what he saw in Georgia that Georgia's just too close to recognize than what he might know about Texas. I think that's a really good point, Terrence. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if Florida played Texas yet or not. I don't know, but if I'm bringing Billy in as a coach, I'm asking him what did he see from another eye that we can't see inside the building. So it's another eye, and he could give Georgia the reports that they made on them. Like, okay, here's the things that we saw and thought that we could take advantage of, and here's some things that Texas may look at the same. So I think it had to do more with self-scouting more than anything about Texas.
I think that's such a good point. I'm really glad that you said that. Let me also say one more thing about this topic. To me, what's amazing is, and this is true obviously for guys like Sark and Kirby, but it's also true at the high school level too. As somebody who watches these games closely and watches the coaches coaching, especially in these high school games on Friday, I'm always amazed. I know you'll be like this, your brother be like this down at Washington County, all these high school coaches the same way. It just seems like to me the sideline always knows what's coming, and you're trying to yell to the players. And of course, right now I'm as hoarse as I can be. I wouldn't be able to do this either. Most coaches sound like me. You're trying to yell to players, hey, this is coming. it's inside zone or it's whatever else. The coaches always seem to know what's coming, but they can't quite get the players to hear them or understand them. It's amazing how much that goes on. College is the same way. If you ever watch the sideline close enough, there's always some sort of indication of this is what's about to happen. And maybe the players recognize it, maybe they don't, because they're obviously 30 yards away from where the coaches are standing. But to me, a guy like Sark, a guy like Kirby, and their staffs, they already seem to possess all the football knowledge that can be possessed. It's just simply a matter of how it works against the other one in the chess match during the game. But most of these guys seem to have a pretty strong intuition for what's about to happen pre-play as it is.
Yes, because you have so much data and information and tendencies from just scouting. A lot of these games have been put in the computer and already generated data even weeks before you play them. So we have all the information that we need. So all coaches on the sideline can see the formation. We can see the shifts. Every player can't see those. So we have scouted enough for them to know that this is a possibility that's coming when they're in this formation, how they're lined up here. So we have tendencies. Everyone has tendencies. Everyone has things that they love to do. I don't care what level it's on. When it's time to make a play, when it's third down and short, we're going to run the play that the team is most comfortable running. So the players on the field, it's hard for them to see that, but it's easier for coaches and everyone on the sideline to see it.
Okay, so I said before you joined us that I'm actually fairly confident in Georgia on Saturday, and sometimes that confidence makes me nervous because – it's like for various points this year, I've been a little bit more skeptical, but now Georgia's playing better. It also played, I think, well against Texas twice last season, obviously and earning 2 wins. So as a way of counterbalancing my own confidence, let me ask you a couple of things that maybe would concern me, and I want to hear what you think about this. We've seen the Georgia offense play very well since the loss to Alabama several weeks ago, but that hasn't necessarily always come against either great teams or great defenses. Ole Miss is a great team, not a great defense. Teams like Kentucky, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, these aren't, very good teams as measured by their ranking or their SEC standings. So the point that I'm getting to is, how well do you think the Georgia offense, which has been playing very well, how well do you think it's going to hold up against a stiffer defensive test than it's probably faced in several weeks?
Yeah, that's a good question because Georgia offense has been playing very well since the Alabama game. So I just think the confidence that they have gained throughout the season since the Alabama game is going to just lead us to just play better. And one person in particular that we really have to give our hats out to is the Gunnar Stockton. I think he has improved each week. At the beginning of the season, he looked like a quarterback that hasn't started that many games, but now he's playing, some of the best football that you can ask for a guy who probably still only got 10 starts up under his belt. So it all comes down to that quarterback position at the end of the day. And he's been playing some tremendous football, and give credit to Bobo and staff for preparing him and putting him in a right position to make plays. So I'm fairly confident that this is not the same Gunnar Stockton that started against Texas or played against Texas last year. Once Carson Beck got hurt, now he's a totally different player. So I'm looking at Gunnar to continue to grow as a quarterback and lead his team to victory on Saturday.
The other thing I mentioned a moment ago, too, is that Georgia had 2 very good defensive game plans against Texas last season. The game in October, where Georgia really stifled from the word go and got more pass rush last year in that game than they did for most of their games. That was an awesome thing to see. And as I said, it maybe makes you more confident in Saturday's game, too, the same 2 opponents. But a lot of that last year was led by a Michael Williams, one of his best games since Georgia's career against Texas. Jalen Walker was all over the place that day. These are 2 very high first-round draft picks, and maybe right now, at least in terms of the next NFL draft next spring, maybe Georgia doesn't quite have that same level of first-round talent. That if that's what it took to stifle Texas a year ago, do they have that sort of front-end talent on this team here right now? Georgia's defense seemingly is playing a little better too, but do you see the kind of dynamic playmakers for Georgia right now that were so instrumental against Texas last year?
Well, let's be honest. Those 2 guys are first-round picks for a reason,
Yeah.
and I don't think we have anyone on the front 7 right now that's equal to the talent that they possess. So it's going to be what I call kind of manufactured pressure, where we are bringing more linebackers. You saw the linebackers last week against Mississippi State have 3 sacks, I think, amongst the 2 linebackers. So we're going to have to get pressure. We're going to have to find pressure from somewhere and make Arch uncomfortable in the pocket. If we've seen throughout this season right now that he's willing to throw the ball to the other team when there's pressure. I don't think there's any quarterback in the SEC that can't perform well if he's allowed to stand in the pocket comfortably and just throw the football. So we're going to have to get pressure. We're going to have to make him uncomfortable, and we're going to have to make him use his legs to get out of a situation. So that's something that we will have to see. What edge rusher is going to just step the game up and have a day like Jalen Walker, like Michael. So it's up to them. It's up to the players. They're going to be well prepared. So now it's up to them to go out and do their part and make plays on the field.
Terrence, I love the conversation. Let me ask you one more before we go. Always interested in your thoughts on the guys that catch passes, and obviously going to have to make some big plays through the air to beat Texas on Saturday. The running game is going to be crucial, but, Gunnar Stockton continuing to connect as he has. Anybody on your mind as far as who might step up and have the big day catching the football on Saturday? That's obviously something we always lean on you for. Who do you have your mind on as we move towards Texas on Saturday?
I'm going to go with he's been playing so well lately. I'm going to go with Dylan Bell, and not necessarily just catching passes down the field, just his ability to block on the perimeter, his ability to run the football on jet sweeps. He's been playing so well this year because I think he's in the right position than last year. He's a guy that you just have to find ways to get him the ball and not necessarily just strictly playing wide receiver. So I'm looking for Dylan Bell to kind of be that extra guy or another guy to make some big plays on Saturday because he's made big plays all season this year.
All right. Great stuff, Terrence. Appreciate that. As we said, best of luck to Mount Vernon tomorrow. And then, of course, we head towards the winter. We're also thinking about getting back to the bubble work and training for the 2026 season, which is always here sooner than folks realize. And the work to get ready for that begins really right away. So if people want to connect with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy in anticipation of some work later on this winter, how can they connect with you?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, thanks for your time. Best of luck tomorrow. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Great stuff there from Terrence Edwards. We really appreciate that. And we're going to keep the great guests going here, too. How about our guy, Rodrigo Blankenship, coming up? Rodrigo going to be with us tonight for DawgNation on Tap. This was a thrill for me because I would have loved to have had Rodrigo here. He's had a million things going on. So, getting him squared away and getting him ready to go for tonight was always going to be a little bit of a challenge for us. But he was kind enough to make some time for us tonight. We're happy to have him. And he's made some time for us today here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, too. So let's talk to Rodrigo Blankenship here right now. And Rodrigo, let me just say, on behalf of all of DawgNation, who's just loved having you as part of our game day coverage this year, thank you so much for being at DawgNation on Tap tonight. Looking forward to seeing you in person. What a great event that's going to be, and certainly the perfect build-up for a gigantic game against Texas on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being here tonight. I'm so glad I could hang out with you guys this morning as well. And like you said, it's going to be a big-time matchup this weekend against Texas. I know that coming into this season, this was projected to be a potential top 5 matchup like it was last year. Obviously, Texas had some falters earlier in the season, but they're definitely playing well now. And now it's shaping up to still be, a very highly ranked matchup with both of these two teams. So I'm very excited for tonight for our event, and also very excited for the Dawgs to play this weekend.
And listen, Rodrigo, in light of that, I don't make any bones about this. Big Georgia fan, have my emotions on my sleeve sometimes. And I said earlier this week that I think there were probably various points during this year that I don't know that I thought that Georgia would be where it is right now. One-loss team hosting Texas right here, where it has a chance to arguably clinch a spot in the college football playoff, stay alive for a top 4 seed and maybe a first-round bye. There's a lot that can still come Georgia's way by winning on Saturday. And while I always knew that Georgia had the potential, I don't know that I was completely confident that Georgia was going to realize all that potential. So you and I talk about this every single Saturday in the DawgNation postgame show. The fact that Georgia has continually found a way as frequently as it has, I think that's commendable, and I'm very grateful for it because it makes the rest of November really fun for all of us because there's nothing like these big games. I'm glad that Georgia's got one on Saturday, and I think the fact that Georgia has overcome all of the so-called adversity that it has to get to this spot, I didn't know that Georgia necessarily would do this, but man, I am so glad they have.
I'm so glad they have as well. Like you said, they've just found ways to win, week in and week out in some of these very tough matchups in the SEC every week that we've seen with the shootout against Tennessee and, a grueling game against Auburn where, we had a crazy turn of events and then the Dogs just came alive in the second half. And then, last week at Mississippi State, I think that we saw a different version of this team that Georgia fans have been hoping to see throughout the course of this season. We've always seen that this team has the capability to do great things when everyone is playing well, when everyone's doing their job. This team has been capable of putting up big points, been shutting down, opposing offenses. And we finally saw what I think most of us would consider a complete game from Georgia last week against Mississippi State. And it feels like it's coming at just the right time. I think that was a very encouraging performance to see out of this team heading into this Texas game where, as you mentioned with Terrence Edwards, this is probably going to be one of the stingier defenses that the offense will face this year. There's talent on both sides of the ball for Texas. And so as a Georgia fan, to see them have a complete game in the manner that they did last weekend gives me a lot of confidence that they're going to be ready for this game with one of the toughest opponents they have left on the schedule in the remainder of the regular season. So it's been great to see them perform in the way that they have, especially as of late against Mississippi State. And I think that they're going to continue to bring it this weekend against Texas.
So let me ask you this as a guy who's played, and I realize that the approach the team has to take, coaches and players, is, well, every game is the same and you have to prepare each week the same. I understand why that is, because if you're a roller coaster of emotions in preparation, you're not going to be consistently prepared. I really do get all of that. And yet, from the outside looking in, it is just obvious that some games are bigger than others. SEC championship, college ball playoff, national championship, certainly, and you played in all those games. But also just in the regular season, there's a chance, even with the YouTube weirdness going on, there may be 10 million people watch this thing on Saturday night. This is a gigantic football game. You're a pretty thoughtful guy. As you're a player in the week getting ready for a game of this magnitude, as you're in the locker room prior to a game of this magnitude, how different does it feel when you know you're playing in what is essentially the main event for college football fans in the entire country? How does it feel to be a part of that? You've been that plenty.
I think that early on in my career, there was a little bit of a different feeling. I think in 2016, our team wasn't at the championship level that we have become accustomed to in recent years. But there were a couple instances, I think, in that 2016 season. I think that when we played Auburn in 2016, they came to town. They were a top 10 ranked team. And I think that was the first time that I felt like I'm part of the main event, as you put it, where there were going to be a lot of eyeballs on that game. For one reason or another, more people were paying attention because they wanted to see how Auburn was going to do in that game than they wanted to see how we were going to do. And so that was the first time where I think I felt like, okay, this is the main event. Like, we are at center stage, in the SEC and really on the greater college football landscape in that particular weekend. And so I think that I definitely kind of fine-tuned my preparation for that week. I really wanted to make sure I got every single little detail right. I always want to get my details right, but especially that week, I think that was the first time that I noticed it. But in later years, we'd play in more and more big games. There were more primetime matchups. We went to South Bend in 2017, and then we had a top 10 matchup against Auburn again later in that same season. And so the more you play in those games, the more you become accustomed to it, and the more you just have to fall back on your preparation and just know, hey, I've been in these situations before. I've been in plenty of big games to this point in my career, and I've been able to have success. So I just need to know that all the preparation that I've put in is going to allow me to have success even when the lights are the brightest. And so I think that we've seen that from this team as well this year. They've been in so many tightly contested ball games. Georgia has been at the focal point of college football in so many weeks already this season. I think that they've been in 3 of the most televised games already in this college football season with their matchup against Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss. So Georgia continues to be in the spotlight. And just like how I was able to come through in some big time moments when I played, these players are doing the same thing this season.
How much have you been able to watch Arch Manning this year? Because obviously, at the beginning of the season, the most hyped quarterback of all time, and then unfairly trashed after some rough performances to begin the season. Really, the hype was not his fault. He didn't do anything to cultivate it, but it came his way no matter what. And then the criticism came his way too, and there was very little he could do to deflect at the time. And now it seems like he's settled in and he's just a good quarterback. Famous last name, still gets a lot of immediate attention, but really no different from a performance standpoint than the typical, probably upper third, certainly in the top half of quarterbacks in the SEC, if not approaching the upper third of performers overall. It's like the game is fairly consistent with what you typically think of as a good SEC quarterback, while the attention's almost unlike anything we've ever seen. Have you had much chance to observe Arch Manning, and what do you think about him?
I've been able to watch Arch in a few games this season. I watched their season opener against Ohio State, and obviously that was not his best performance, but I have also watched him play more recently against Florida and against Mississippi State, and he's definitely been playing better as of late. I mean, they've won 4 of their last 5 games, which has been their entire SEC slate up to this point. They beat Oklahoma, they beat Kentucky, a thriller against Mississippi State, and then obviously beating Vanderbilt as well. So he is definitely playing better as of late, especially the last 4 weeks, I'd say. Still a little inconsistent as far as the numbers go. I mean, he's got 4 games this year with less than 200 passing yards, which I don't think anyone would have expected coming into the season, as you said, with just, egregious amounts of hype coming his way, and like you said, he didn't really do anything to warrant it. It's just his last name. It's just part of the family lineage that has brought it his way. But the performance has still been a little inconsistent, but they've been finding ways to win in a similar fashion to Georgia. In 2 of those games that he threw for less than 200 yards, they still won the game. So Texas still has enough talent around him that their offense can still have some production, even if he's not at his best. But he has been playing closer to his true potential in the last few weeks. And so Georgia better be careful. The secondary better be ready. The pass rush better be ready, because I expect he's going to be performing at close to his peak in this primetime game.
Let me ask you one more thing before we let you go, and then, of course, see you tonight for Dawg Nation on Tap. It seems like there's an interesting, I don't want to say debate, but there is an interesting divide in terms of the perception of Georgia and other SEC teams compared to teams like, say, Texas Tech and Indiana right now in the college football playoff race, where it seems like teams like Indiana and Texas Tech and of that variety, they are valued for what they call game control. The fact that they're dominating opponents, are winning a lot of blowout games and comfortable margins of victory for almost the entire game. Whereas Georgia and some other SEC teams, especially Georgia's playing a very tough schedule. It's finding a way to win these games, but it's not exactly controlling the entire game. In fact, we've seen Georgia put on ferocious comebacks many times just to win. And it's very easy for me, a Georgia guy, to ask you, a Georgia guy, hey, which one do you think is better? Obviously, we would probably say Georgia. But in this particular case, Rod, I really do believe football is better served by tough schedules, tough opponents, doing something to win, in some cases miraculous, dramatic fashion, as opposed to what seems like, okay, well, Texas Tech, a very good team in the Big 12, mostly beating up what appears to be lesser opponents. Indiana right now in the Big 10 doing that same sort of thing. Frankly, I don't want any more of that in football than they already have. I do like the brand of the football the SEC is playing in, and even though Georgia's not exactly dominating its opponents right now, I do think there's something to be said for the fact that they find a way to keep winning these games. It's an easy thing for a pro-Georgia show to say, but I actually believe it probably is correct.
Yeah, I think there is something to say for Georgia continuing to find ways to win. I do think that the SEC from top to bottom is probably the deepest conference. There are some very good teams in some other conferences, as you mentioned, with the Big Ten, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon are very strong programs. But I think when you look from top to bottom, the competitiveness of the lower half of the SEC is a lot more competitive than, the bottom tier of most other conferences in college football. And so even when you're going into a game like Auburn or Mississippi State, where Mississippi State coming into that game was, 5-4. Their record doesn't necessarily reflect it, but Mississippi State was probably 20 points away from being an 8-1 team going into that matchup against Georgia. They've had some incredibly tight ball games, and sometimes the cookie just, crumbles the other team's way, and that's kind of been the case of Mississippi State this year. Them and Georgia are kind of two opposite sides of the same coin, where Mississippi State has had some tough breaks not fall their way, and Georgia's had some things fall their way in their tight matchups. And so you see the kind of the paradigm, that the two opposite sides there, where Georgia's walking into that game with a pretty sensational record, and Mississippi State is not. But the talent for both teams is very, very competitive. Even though Georgia really took care of business there, I mean, Mississippi State was in some tight games with plenty of the upper tier teams in the SEC. And so I do think that there's something to be said for how tough your schedule is, playing tough opponents week in and week out, where you have talent all across the board. from all of these tough opponents. I think about 2 years ago in 2023, the game control was something that was skewed heavily in Georgia's favor, because so many of those games Georgia just dominated from start to finish. They might give up a touchdown in the first quarter, but after that, it's all Dogs the rest of the way. And that hasn't necessarily been the case the last 2 years. But Georgia did that with a tough schedule. Playing in the SEC was still dominating week in and week out, and that was really a testament to how good that Georgia team was in 2023. Obviously, it's been a different story this year, but the fact that you are still able to find ways to win, as I've said numerous times throughout the season, I think is a testament to how good your team can be. When you can win in a shootout, when you can win in a defensive battle, a defensive slugfest, it just speaks to the adaptability and the versatility of your team. And that's something that's very important, especially when you get into the college football playoffs and you're playing teams that you're not used to playing every single year. You're going to have to find ways to adapt and put together a different game plan that will still allow you to walk away with the win in the college football playoffs.
Rodrigo, I tell you what, I appreciate that so much. Really, really good stuff. Thanks for being on the show today. Can't wait to see you tonight. DawgNation on tap from Terrapin Brewery in Athens. In fact, we're still inviting folks to be there 6 to 9 p.m., hanging out, having a great football conversation. So many special guests, so much fun. Rodrigo, look forward to seeing you tonight. Happy to have you a part of that. And, of course, we'll see you on Saturday for all the game day coverage for Georgia and Texas as well, Rodrigo. We'll look forward to talking to you then.
Absolutely. Look forward to tonight.
Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Normally it's the guest that gives the Go Dogs for whatever reason. I just instinctively kind of gave that to Rodrigo right there, but never a bad time to say that. Really, really good stuff. Rodrigo tonight going to be a DawgNation on tap. Boy, going to be a lot of fun. 6 to 9 p.m. There at the Terrapin Brewery. Go RSVP if you can, because I'm going to get in trouble if I don't tell you to do that. DawgNation.com/RSVP. But honestly, just come, hang out. We'll have a good time. Terrapin Beer, Cerchero's Food, DawgNation Team, Hot Rod, Davin Bellamy, John Stinchcomb, and tonight, somebody is going to win a pair of tickets to the big game coming up on Saturday. By the way, speaking of Saturday, I want to make you aware before we do our SEC through, you almost got a little bit of a voice crack right there. So for those of you who like laughing, when the voice cracks these days, you just got a good little voice crack right there. But before we do our SEC through, I want to tell you something about Saturday. Big time event taking place at the UGA bookstore. Now, that's always our home away from home for our DawgNation post-game call-in show. My gosh, the post-game show this year has just been a grand slam home run, I believe, every single Saturday, if you don't mind me being self-serving by saying so. And it's going to be a great one back in Athens on Saturday. But as a lead-in to that, an unbelievable game day, they've got big autograph guests at the UGA bookstore from 5 to 7 p.m. How about this? The father-son duo of Dominique Wilkins, who's in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and his son Jacob Wilkins, now a freshman phenom at Georgia, they're going to be there together signing autographs. That's incredible. How much fun would a Dominique Jacob Wilkins duo on whatever you can get it signed on? How great would that be, and how much value one day could that have? That's as someone who likes collectibles and memorabilia and things like that, that is a very, very cool thing to have as a part of your collectible opportunity right now. I think that that's well worth your time just in itself. Obviously, Buck Bellew going to be there too. We always love when Buck Bellew is there. Buck, by the way, got a great shout out the other day from Pat McAfee when ESPN College Game Day was in Athens. I loved seeing that. Buck's going to be there too. So it's 5 to 7 p.m. Buck Bellew, Dominique, and Jacob Wilkins. It's right there next to the Tate Student Center across from Sanford Stadium. All the great apparel. Peter Millar, On Reserve, the Nike Coaches gear, Horn Legend, all those great apparel makers making that good-looking UGA gear. You can get all of that at the UGA bookstore. We'll see you there after the game for the DawgNation post-game call-in show, but big autographs prior to the game and a great chance to get stocked up on some gorgeous UGA memorabilia and apparel in lead up to the Christmas season. That's always a fun thing. Okay, let's do our SEC through here just for a moment. So we've been saying that for Saturday, the Georgia win against Texas, we believe it will come. If it does come, there's a lot that Georgia can gain from this. Georgia, I think for all intents and purposes, can clinch a spot in the college football playoff. That's good. As we said, I think it was yesterday's show, there's also a chance that Georgia stays alive for one of these top 4 seeds and a chance to get a bye in the first round of the playoff, whether it wins the SEC or not. This win against Texas could help keep Georgia alive for that, and I believe that really matters. So if you want to view this through the positive lens, there is a lot to be gained by Georgia winning. Of course, that's true, but it's especially true in this case. Just for a moment, let's play the other side of this. What happens if there are SEC upsets on Saturday? Now, shudder to the thought, Texas beating Georgia, but just for the sake of conversation, let's mention that. And how about the other game? And this is, I don't think, a wild circumstance for it to take place. Oklahoma beat Alabama a year ago, beat them badly. The game was in Norman, but they beat them handily, and this Oklahoma team is better than that team was. They'll play on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. Alabama's only about a touchdown favorite. What happens if you get both those upsets? We don't want Texas to beat Georgia, but just for the sake of conversation, what if you get Texas over Georgia? What if you get Oklahoma over Alabama? What is going to happen to the SEC playoff scenarios after that? All of a sudden now you've got Georgia, Bama, Oklahoma, Texas, Vanderbilt. You've got 5 teams at 10-2. Very few of them have actually played each other. You have the chance of an 11-1 Ole Miss. You've got 9-3 Tennessee still hanging around, but that's probably the potential for 9-3 Tennessee, but that's probably disregarded. But you're basically talking about 6 teams separated by very little, because the 11-1 team, Ole Miss, would have lost head-to-head to Georgia, who would have lost to both Texas and Alabama, but Alabama would have lost to Oklahoma. Oklahoma would have lost to Texas. What do you do about that? That is a mess. Now, we have some version of this every year where there's some nightmare scenario where all these teams are tied with the same record. We were concerned about that a year ago. As it ended up, we had more teams at 9-3 than 10-2. But every year we do the thing where, like, oh my gosh, what happens if all these teams are tied at 10-2? And somehow, some way, we always seem to avoid that specific version of the chaos. We just avoid it somehow. And maybe we'll avoid that again this year too. Certainly in the case of Georgia and Texas, I believe that Georgia's going to win, and that at least keeps things simple for Georgia. I believe that Alabama will probably beat Oklahoma. I think the game will be close. And I do think there is a chance that it gets really, really messy in the SEC before it's said and done. And as I said to Rodrigo Blankenship a moment ago, when it comes to how the selection committee views all this stuff, we told you yesterday that quietly, without saying it out loud, the committee this year and all years seems to value the notion of game control. This is an official stat. You can find it on the tab for ESPN's Football Power Index in the resume section. They care about game control more than they ever let on. And that all things being equal, they seem to like game control with a pretty record more so than they like strength of schedule and a not so pretty record. They just seem to really value game control. But the one thing I've always said about the committee is that whatever the committee rewards is going to be incentivized. And whatever is incentivized, you will then get more of. That's just how economies work. And college football, all these entities being businesses, this is essentially an economy. The college football economy is going to work the same way. That whatever is incentivized, you will get more of. And if you incentivize more pretty records with blowout wins, that's what you'll get more of, which is not as entertaining for fans. Case in point, we said this yesterday about Texas A&M. If Texas A&M is currently ranked 3rd after having beaten Notre Dame on the road, Indiana doesn't play anybody out of conference, then what was the purpose of Texas A&M playing and beating Notre Dame? In future years, I think you can pretty well assume the SEC is just not going to do this anymore because it isn't incentivized, and all actors within an economy always respond to incentives. And this just right now is not particularly incentivized. So, of course, I'm pro-SEC, and of course, I'm going to make the pro-SEC argument. I don't shy away from admitting that. Of course, that's true. But I wouldn't make the argument if I didn't deep down believe it's right. And this is why I believe that the pro-SEC argument is probably correct. Because it's just a more enjoyable brand of football. It is. It gets better TV ratings. It generates more interest. It's just better to watch good teams play each other and have to fight to the wire to try to win it, even if it includes very little game control. And we've acknowledged Georgia has not been very game control-y this year. They haven't. They've There have been several moments this year when I thought, oh, this may be a Georgia loss today, but somehow they pull it out. It'd be better if they blew teams out. As Rodrigo said, in 2023, they were doing that, but nobody seemed to care as much about game control when Georgia was doing that. In 2023, they were blowing teams out for the most part, but that wasn't probably as enjoyable a season as these last couple have been, where Georgia's beating these good teams in dramatic fashion. So we like the brand of the SEC. No surprise there on that. It has been incredibly entertaining, and to bring it back to where we started a moment ago, there is a chance that the most entertainment is still yet to come. There could be some chaos results. There could be some upsets that puts the playoff pecking order for the SEC into a total blender. And if that happens, well, good luck trying to sort all that out. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. Now, speaking of Georgia and playoff implications and things along those lines, let me also remind you that we want you to be a part of another game for Georgia this year that's also got some playoff implications. How about the Deep South's not oldest rivalry? That's a different rivalry. This is the one that's normally known. Georgia's got a lot of names for its rivalries between the Cocktail Party, the Deep South's oldest, and Clean Old-Fashioned Hate. For now, we're talking about Clean Old-Fashioned Hate. That's what we normally think of as the Georgia Tech rivalry. This year, a little bit different location for this. It's going to be there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But you know what? Still a great opportunity for you, though, to be there to get your tickets for this, because for Georgia, it's not only a chance to protect its playoff positioning and maybe stay alive for a top 4 seed, it's also a chance to maybe ruin Georgia Tech season. And I wish I was a better person than this, but I am not. I am simply as God made me. Given the chance to ruin Tech season, boy, that just sounds like a lot of fun. And Georgia fans being in the building there that day to watch it happen and influence the outcome by being as loud as I know you will be, that seems like a lot of fun too. So I want you there for this. Check out mercedes-benzstadium.com/events. Get your tickets for Georgia Tech in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's the day after Thanksgiving. It's November 28th. It's Black Friday afternoon, if you will. Get your tickets there for that. The great rivalry between Georgia and Georgia Tech taking place this year at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's your chance to be there, be a part of it. So check out mercedes-benzstadium.com/events for more on that. Cannot wait to see you there for that. Big one going down on Black Friday afternoon, November 28th, for Georgia and Georgia Tech. All right, before we wrap up the show here today, let me do a couple of things here very quick. First of all, I want to give a shout out here. I had some folks reach out to me. Chris and Susie Fountain today are celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary. These are big Georgia fans. They had just gone to the Mississippi State game on Saturday. They traveled to Starkville to watch the Dawgs play, and they're celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary. So before we wrap up the show or do anything like that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Chris and Susie Fountain. We love good news for folks, babies being born, weddings taking place, anniversaries being enjoyed, and the 15th wedding anniversary is a pretty big one right there. So very happy for both of you on that. So Chris and Susie, wanted to say congratulations to both of you on the event of your 15th wedding anniversary. And as we say goodbye to you today, I want to do something fun for our golden shoe today. I had this sent in to me from my friend Mallory. Her husband, Brendan Jaspers, has done something really creative here. Now, it's almost scary how good this is. What Brendan did is he wrote a song about Texas, obviously making fun of the Longhorns ahead of the game on Saturday, and then he used AI to produce the song. And as I said before, if any of you have ever heard AI music before, it's crazy how good some of this is getting. It's wild. It's really funny to basically take our mutual disdain for Texas right now and turn that into a song. So I got permission from Brendan to play this on the show, a way of kind of laughing at Texas out of the game on Saturday. So we'll bring our fight song down. And for our golden shoe today, this coming from Brendan Jaspers, really highlighting a lot of the things we don't like about the Longhorns in musical form. Let me give you a chance to hear a little bit of this right now. Let's enjoy some of this. Take a listen to this.
Every fall they sell that line, we're back. No proof, just pride. Possessing kings, post-game tears. Same excuse, just
this is a pretty good vibe, right?
Left the Big 12 just to be an SEC doormat. Heads too big to fit in that 10-gallon. Poke 'em home, they still ain't back.
Texas is not back. We like that. We like that. McConaughey on the sideline. Bevo turned into brisket. Very good stuff. Once again, Brendan Jasper's putting that together. We'll let this play us out today. I'll also remind you, lousy, stinking Gators. While we make fun of Texas, we can also make fun of Florida, too. Been a long time since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs about 1,832 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's our Gatorator updater. Thanks to Brendan for sending that in. Very clever song. You can check it out, by the way, on Spotify if you want to there as well. Can I see the graphic one more time on that? We'll just give him some more love on the way out the door. Do we have that one more time we can show? Yeah, so it's Hook 'em Who, any given Saturday on Spotify. You can check that out. Hook 'em Who, any given Saturday, I should say. Find that on Spotify. Very good stuff. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, they show up on time. Doing the work that's promised, the price is promised. Always great stuff there. And I'm telling you right now, the stuff that people are doing AI music-wise is wild. I saw this thing, I think it was Joe Rogan the other day that was doing something like that. And it's crazy what you can get now. Just if you know how to use the right service with the right prompt, it is just amazing. So very funny stuff from Brendan there on that. It's a full song, verses, chorus, everything else, making fun of McConaughey and all the Texas hype and Arch Manning. All of that very well done. So good job by Brendan Jaspers there on that. Okay, let us... By the way, David Jackson likes the idea of turning Bevo into brisket. That's the one good thing I'll say about Texas, is I have grown to really like brisket. As a true Georgian, I've always been a fan of pork barbecue, and I think of pork as barbecue. But honestly, you have enough good brisket, and there's a lot of bad brisket out there. But if you have enough good brisket, I think you're left to conclude, no, brisket's pretty good too. Brisket's pretty good too. All right, so let's do what else. Get some comments. Mario Smith likes the idea of some Bevo fajita tacos. I like that too. That seems really good. Also, we'll see tonight, DawgNation on tap. Can't wait for that. Let me pop over to DawgNation.com. Garrison Tucker says, does Bowens or Nate get more touches on Saturday? Yeah, it's interesting to see, because I think a lot of Georgia fans were happy when Bowens started the game against Mississippi State after not starting against Florida. And then lo and behold, Nate Frazier went on to have the game of his career. So I think where we are right now is that I think the Georgia fans should be happy with both. That at one point in time, it seemed like that Chauncey Bowens was clearly the best Georgia running back, the better of the running backs, after it was supposed to be Nate Frazier's year. But now they're both seemingly firing on all cylinders, and you probably do need a pretty good performance from that tandem to win on Saturday. But it's been interesting to watch the way in which their stock has gone up at various times during the years. Our guy Will Dickerson checks in today. Feels like we hadn't seen Will in a while, but he's checking in today with his typical message to be an alpha dog when Texas comes to Athens. I love that. UGA Marine says, remember, low and slow when you're smoking. Says you don't turn them, you burn them. Yeah, so there you go. That's good. That's good advice from UGA Marine, who I know knows that very well. Very good stuff. All right, what else? Senior Dog 54 says 4 times this year the game turned on a 4th down play. We're 3-1 in those games. Who knows? We could be looking at that scenario again on Saturday. It's entirely possible. It is. It is entirely possible that could be true once again. Garrison Tucker says that Sturgill, Simpson, Coulter, Wall is the only country out right now. I do get that a lot of people feel that way. And I know that Sturgill Simpson is incredibly popular. I do get that. He is viewed to be more authentic than other country artists are sometimes viewed to be. I will tell you that I don't always buy that. I do. For whatever reason, and I've listened to plenty of Sturgill Simpson, Turtles All the Way Down, all that kind of stuff. I've listened to plenty of Sturgill Simpson. I don't know that it quite speaks to me in the same way that it speaks to everybody else, or others who say that. In other words, I'm not afraid of a little bit of mass market country every now and then. Not afraid of that at all. I like some hipsterish country, alt country, if you want to call it that way. I like some hipsterish country, but I'm not afraid to listen to just some regular good old American mass market country music. Not afraid of that at all. Let's see what else. Matt Brucavina checking in. We know how big of a game this is for him on Saturday. Let's see what else. SEM Dog says need to play a clean game, win the turnover battle. I would agree with that. Over on YouTube for a moment. .30 checks in to say the problem this year with everybody is no offense against Bama, defense and not capitalizing against our mistakes, which our quarterback doesn't make much of. Good luck beating us. Oh, he's an Alabama fan, so there you go. That may be why that one's so hard to follow. But there you go. Good to have you here, 30, though. Glad you're here. Mario Smith gives you a dog on top. Appreciate that. P. Rich says that AI stuff is scary. It is, man. I'm telling you right now. I've always been of the theory that I think that people have always liked AI images better. Everybody wants filters in their photos, and almost anybody would be willing to do a fake photo if they thought it made them look better. People have always, I believe, preferred fake images. They just have. Nobody likes to see the real image of what they look like, myself included. People prefer fake images. I don't believe that people will ever prefer fake words. I just don't. I'm talking about fake written words that you can use, ChatGPT to write a thank you note or whatever else. But, and I don't mean just the dashes. People seem to focus on the dashes too much. Because, normal writers use dashes all the time. But I still think there's a sloppy nature to AI writing that just doesn't sound very human. I don't believe that people will ever prefer AI writing to actual human writing. I just don't think they will. In fact, the more we see the proliferation of AI writing, the more AI writing is using other AI to form its words. And I think it's in some cases getting worse. That is my theory. But man, some of that music stuff, as quickly as it can be produced and as easy as it seems to come out, because people just don't listen to music that closely. They just don't. A lot of times music is background. A lot of times music is just about how it makes you feel. You just don't think that much about it. It is scary to think how good some of that already is. Scary to think. Scary to think. Curtis Jackson says the Dogs are already off to a good start this week because there are 12 guys playing Monday Night Football. It is amazing. We haven't talked much about that. We just hadn't had time to. But how many Georgia guys were playing that game between Philly and Green Bay the other night? Crazy. And I know that Joe Buck gave the Georgia guys a lot of love too, which was fun to see. But that is wild. That is really wild. Sin Hot Atlanta says the AI music is definitely spooky. It is interesting to me because it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. But we all seem to say the same thing, which is interesting. I'm not saying, I don't know what it means necessarily. But we all say it's scary. Oh, that's scary how good that is. We all say that. Interesting that we choose that word when we could have been saying, oh, this is amazing, or this is fascinating, or this is remarkable, or it's wonderful, or it's bad. I hate this. This is fake. But what we say is scary, and people say it a lot. I've said it. Sin Hot says it. It is interesting that we all gravitate towards scary. There is something about this that scares us a little, and I don't think we should ignore that. Let's see what else. Let's see what else. There's a little bit of Alabama trash talk in here, which I don't mind, but it's not, necessarily relevant. And by the way, P. Rich also says the AI is scary. Yeah, a lot of people think the same thing. All right. Anything else? I'll come back to YouTube in a minute. Let me pop back over to Facebook and see how they're doing. Let me go back to DawgNation.com while I do. Same thing. My voice sounds a little rough right now. I think I'm just not talking that loud. By the way, Matt Rugavina, in celebration of Saturday's game, wearing the Rose Bowl shirt right now. Listen, whatever it takes to get the good vibes going, I'm here for all of that. Whatever it takes, I'm here for all of that. Bill Sanders says, does BA like bro country? Yeah, I kind of do. I do. I listen to a good bit of Aldine, listen to a good bit of Luke Bryan. I don't have any problem whatsoever listening to bro country. In fact, what you might call bro country compared to what people think of as cooler, more authentic country, I listen to far more of the mass market country music than I do the commonly thought to be authentic. I like Whiskey Myers, listen to them. I like Red Clay Strays, I listen to them. But I don't care for Sturgill Simpson. Don't care for him. And don't care for a lot of people of that ilk. It doesn't speak to me. That is not about my life. It's not. Does not remind me of anything that's ever happened in my own life. A lot of the mass market stuff does. And I am not afraid to say that. Matt Rugavina says he was a part of our Dog Nation invasion in Austin last year. He's going to be wearing that T-shirt tomorrow, which I love to think about. I should try to pull that one out, too. I forgot about that. I should pull that out. Oh, by the way, we got 3 Dog Nation birthdays here today. That's awesome. A lot of folks celebrating birthdays. That's great to see. Happy birthday to everybody in here today. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, let's see what else. Oh, how about this? Matt is such a house divider that he and his wife will not be watching the game together, which is probably fair. Probably fair. As long as y'all come back together when the game's over with and everybody makes peace again. A little separation, not a bad thing. Gary Holt says you're going to have to take a 2-week vacation and rest your voice. There is a chance that once the season's over, and I pray the season's not over until February, but there is a chance, or nearly February, there's a chance I may just have to have surgery, y'all. I mean, there's a strong possibility that it's not going to get better on its own because I'm trying to take care of it. And it's, for the most part, maintained. You know, it hasn't really gotten worse, but it's not really getting better. There's a very good chance that I may, and if I do have to have surgery, it's not going to be one of those things. I'm not going to be out for like 6 months or anything like that. It may only be a few days, but it'll be, you know, I may have to get this done. Garrison Duggar says my not dislike, but lack of preference for Sturgill Simpson. He says he's where my mom's family is from in Jackson County, Kentucky. Our families know one another from the coal mines back to the 50s. Well, listen, that's incredibly cool. And it sounds like obviously you've got a deeper connection. And I'm not against it. I'm just not. And I don't have anything personally against Sturgill Simpson at all either. I really don't. Like, I don't have one personal thing against him. But I just don't always feel the need to gravitate towards what the internet says is the most authentic version of country music. It's probably my own hang-up more than anything else. And like I said, I've listened to plenty of the music. I don't hate it, don't dislike it, but I have never felt the need to tell somebody, you know, I listen to real country music. Because honestly, I think of Luke Bryan and Jason Aldean and Zach Top and guys like that as real country music. But I'm not against Sturgill Simpson, don't get me wrong. I am a little bit allergic to the internet narrative that some country is authentic and they don't make that anymore. Because the truth is, in any given era, I was alive in the 90s. The country music that was popular then was thought to be, from a critical standpoint, the wrong kind of country music too. People treat it like it's good now, but trust me, when I was living in the 90s, what we think of now as classic country music, critics weren't falling over themselves to like that either. I've been alive long enough to know that the so-called critics are always going to find some sort of fault with whatever the current version of popular country music is. They're just always going to do that. And like I said, that's probably my own hang-up more than anything else, but it is one of those things you can't help but notice. Marshall Fleming says, my voice may be fine when high school football season's over with because calling games aren't the voice. I love calling the games, but Marshall, you're 100% right. Calling games is far worse on my voice than doing the show is. Far worse. First of all, when you do the show, you're in the studio. I got headphones on. I can hear my voice. It's very quiet in here. It's much easier to do the show in studio than it is to be out in a stadium where it's loud. And look, when the game is exciting, I want to raise my level to match the excitement. Hopefully not like Gus Johnson, who I think embarrassed himself this past Saturday, but still, you want to be enthusiastic in the moment. So definitely, why is my voice the way that it is? It probably traces back to high school football more than this show itself. Gary Holt said, I let Kaylee host go with Flo yesterday. That wasn't voice related, although it was probably pretty good for my voice. I had to take my son somewhere yesterday, to be honest with you. And I live 200 miles from the studio. And so to time it so I could be where I needed to be to get him, to take him where I needed to go, I had to just go do the show from home. And I could have hosted the show from home, but if Kaylee's in the studio and I'm at home, it's probably better to keep it as a studio-led show. That was the whole thought behind that. Ken Holcomb likes the Red Clay Strays, but he says they're not country. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's still in the country. People who like country music like the Red Clay Strays, so to me, that's probably close enough. Brian Whitaker, thank you. He says, whatever you decide to do about your voice, we're going to be here for you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I will tell you this, and I won't bore you with all the details. The voice issue has made me as a human being far more introspective. Like I have done I won't bore you with all the details on this, but boy, I have done some real soul searching around just my human identity as a man, given the fact that my voice has not been quite as dependable. It has definitely caused me to do some serious thinking. You don't care about that, but I'm telling you right now it has. Scott Anderson likes Conway Twitty. I tell you this, I love to go back to like some 80s country. I love that. Now, I didn't like country in the 80s because I was a child, nor did I like country in the 90s when I was in high school. But it's one of those things I just grew into as I got older, for sure. For sure that's the case. Al Chandler says country music was real country music in the 60s and 70s. It went downhill after that. And that sentiment's the same thing people, were saying in the 90s of, these guys, this is not real country. This is not like it was in Waylon Jennings or whatever else. But now the 90s is treated like, well, that was real country. This is not real country now. I'm just telling you right now, without getting too deep into this, the forces of culture have always been against whatever country music was. And there's always been some reason that something about it's just not quite right. It's always been wrong in the ideas of the forces of culture. That's one of the reasons why I can't participate in there's an authentic version of country that doesn't get airplay on, to the extent we even still have radio. There's an authentic version of country that doesn't get airplay. That's the real country, and this stuff that everybody knows about, that's the fake country. There's been some version of that storyline going on for 50 years. Curtis Jackson says there's a lot of chatter that DJ Lagway may be on his way out of Gainesville. So admittedly, I haven't followed this quite as closely. They benched him, right? I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance he probably will leave. Probably needs to. And then the question becomes, okay, well, how good is he away from Florida? I don't know. There's so much attention to what Arch has and hasn't done this year. It's important to note that DJ Lagway did not have a very good year. Maybe some of that traces back to health or whatever else. But boy, he certainly didn't save Florida from the fate that eventually befell Billy Napier. Certainly did not. So yeah, I think there's a good chance that he leaves. He'll obviously be a hot commodity, and I'm not telling you he won't be good where he goes, but I do think it's fair to wonder, well, how good is he really? This was a very strange year for quarterbacks in the SEC. Lagway, Garrett Nussmeier, to a certain extent Arch Manning, although he's coming out of some of that. I guess you'll put Lenora Sellers in there too, although I think that Sellers is still very high on draft boards. Maybe Sellers doesn't belong on that list. But boy, a lot of these quarterbacks, certainly Nussmeier and Lagway, who were supposed to be outstanding, just really have not been. Wildman Slayer says, give me some George Jones. I saw where George Strait's going to do a concert in Clemson. I hate to give Clemson's NIL some money, but that might be fine. Doggy says, if it's speaking of George Strait, if it's not George Strait or Midland, I ain't listening. So there you go. All right, we got to get ready to go here in a minute. Jim Blair likes Hank Williams and Hank Williams Jr. I like that. Ken Holcomb on the subject of Conway Twitty as a singer. Yeah, very good singer. Let's see what else. Jim Blair, by the way, coming up to Houston for the game against Mill Creek on Friday. Philip Wells giving you a Soggy Bottom Boys reference, which is a, it's not No Country for Old Men. What's that movie called? The Coen Brothers movie. Not No Country, but
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Thank you very much. There you go. Philip is always giving you the pop cultural references. All right, anything else before we go? Perhaps related to Georgia football. Back on YouTube for a moment. D-Mart says that DJ Lagway's got a little Carson Beck in him. Once the national media took notice, he turned into a prima donna, according to a lot of his teammates. Honestly, I didn't need to probably read more about this. I just hadn't really had time to, and it's making fun of Florida, so it's right up my alley. But I would like to investigate a little bit more about what exactly happened with DJ Lagway. I would probably like to investigate more of that. I think that's probably fair. D-Mart says he saw George Strait at Kyle Field, one of the coolest concerts I've been to. I saw some video of that. That was amazing because they looked like they had a gigantic crowd for that. I did see some video of that. That's really cool. Alan Hampton says, do I have a similar problem with my voice as Alison Krauss? I believe it's called dysphonia. I don't know. First of all, I wish my voice sounded like Alison Krauss's, but as good as. But I just have a thing on my vocal cord. And like when you go to the ENT, like they jam that thing up your nose. And I've had this done several times. Stick it up there and they show you the video and it's like a little red thing on one of my vocal cords. And, try to get it off with like a steroid. Doesn't really work. And probably just have to chop it off, which I'm nervous about. I mean, to be honest with you, but, that may be what happens. So I don't know that it's got a name. Thankfully it's not. Thankfully, not like a cancer or anything like that. At least I've been told. All right. Anything else? D-Mart, appreciate the kind words. All right, we're going to go. By the way, is it H-E-B? Is that you say? That's like the big, is it Heb or Heb or H-E-B, however you say it? Like, I've never been to one of those before. But I always see like that being like the big place out in Texas, but I've never been to one of those before. Happy to have my Kroger here in Georgia, I guess. But anyway, thanks for being here. We will see you tonight. And if you hear this later in the evening, just come and be there. Terrapin Brewery, going to be an awesome time. This is going to be a gigantic event. Very, very big. Really looking forward to it. We're making it what I'm trying to make a full-on multimedia experience. Which is pretentious sounding, but we've tried to do some fun stuff. Cody's put some video together. In other words, that's the less pretentious way to say that. But it's going to be a fun experience, so I hope you'll come for that. Appreciate you being here for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. But tonight, starting at 6 p.m., 6 to 9 p.m., the Terrapin Brewery in Athens. Going to see you there for that. A great way to get ready for the big one on Saturday. And somebody is going to win a pair of tickets, and that's an awesome thing. So can't wait to see you there for that. We appreciate R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. R.S. Andrews takes care of you on all of that. So make sure you check them out today, including as cold weather gets here. It's going to be pretty pleasant in Athens on Saturday, but still cold weather, generally speaking. just get your heating system ready to go and maybe get some new life out of your old unit. That's always a great thing. So find out more online, rsandrews.com. Okay, y'all have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Thanks for being here today. Hope you'll come back and see us again tomorrow.